listening to the musicmarketing.com podcast. How to sell more music, get more people to your shows, and make more money in the music business. Here's your host, music marketer, and author of the book Six Figure Musician, David Hooper. Joining David is his co-host, Wendy Wallace.
This is the musicmarketing.com podcast. From Nashville, Tennessee, I'm David Hooper, and joining me, as always, from Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Not always. I wasn't here the last podcast, but I'm here now. Yes, I'm in Canada.
All right, you better act right, or I'm going to put you back in the cage. That's why.
How are you?
I'm great. This is episode number 10, Wendy, and I was just thinking about when we looked up how many episodes we've done. You know, I cried when I was 10. It was a very hard time for me. I thought I was so old. And I'm looking at this podcast. We're only on number 10. So here we are. And this is going to be a good one, though. We had a great reader question. And before we get to it, I want to talk about NAMM. Do you know about NAMM, Wendy?
We've talked about NAMM before. I'd love to go. I'm jealous that you got to go, even though you've said that the NAMM that you went to recently was kind of the low-key summer, when the one in L.A. is the one that's the really big event. So yeah. Talk about NAMM.
Well, there are two sessions. They call them sessions. It's a trade show, I guess you'd call it. There's also some speakers there. There's panels there. And it's National Association of Music Merchants. Mm-hmm. NAMM, and I think it's NAMM.org. So this is basically any musical instrument manufacturer, Roland, Gibson, Yamaha. We did something with Casio there, had some live broadcasts from WRLT Lightning 100, the flagship station of Music Business Radio, so that was cool. And anyway, all these musical instrument manufacturers come to Nashville every summer. In the winter, as you would expect, they're going to be out in Los Angeles because they really don't have much of a winter out there, right? In Anaheim, California, that's a much bigger show. The summer session has been known as the guitar show, so it's a lot of guitars, obviously. It's amps. It's a lot of educational material. There were mic manufacturers there. And anyway, go to the Music City Center, which is a brand new convention center here in Nashville, Tennessee, and walk the trade show floor. We were there with Music Business Radio. We did I'd say we did 10 or 12 interviews from people. Remember the TV show Shark Tank? You've seen that, right? I know you're in Canada, but it gets up there, I think. Yeah. So there was something called Chord Buddy. Do you remember Chord Buddy? Where
I do remember Chord Buddy.
Yeah. So this guy has a contraption he puts on his guitar neck, and it's kind of like, I guess it looks kind of like Guitar Hero to me. It's some some buttons you put on a real guitar. He was there. Got to spend some time with Yamaha. My friend Tipo Nash has a computerized guitar. He was there. Computerizedguitar.com. Saw a lot of great people that I know in the musical instrument space. I ran into Alan Shacklock. He's been on the Music Business Radio show before. He produced Alarm, Joe Boxers, Andrew Lloyd Webber, Jeff Beck. He's done a lot of stuff. Meatloaf. And you just run into people. Vince Gill was walking around, and basically everybody comes to Nashville, and you look at new equipment, kind of like CVS for the musical instrument industry.
Any takeaways? Anything besides just having a nice experience? Any takeaways any observations or anything that you saw?
Yeah, the thing that I thought was really exciting about it was that music is not dead. Music education is not dead. In a lot of ways, it's a very exciting time. The most exciting time, perhaps, for music education. There are all these electronic things that I told you about this, Wendy, and I know you were excited about it as a guitar player yourself. Yamaha has this iPhone app, and it's Yamaha Sessions, if you search for that in the iPhone store. And it'll literally take an MP3, you push a button, it takes away everything but the guitar, so you can learn guitar licks, you can learn bass licks, you can learn whatever lick you want to learn. It messes with the frequencies. It'll slow things down and keep the pitch so you don't have to tune. That's what we used to have to do when we would slow tracks down. And, I mean, amazing tools like that, and that's for free. So there's really some great educational stuff there. There's some cool, I think, low-priced amps, low-priced guitars that are going to get more people into the music business, more people creating, more people recording. So that was really my big takeaway, is just that it's a really exciting time to be in the music industry.
You know, not to get too much off track, but you know, what you just said leads to a question. You know, when you talk about, like, you know, your book, Six Figure Musician, when we worked on that book, a lot of the emphasis was put on recording and selling your music and playing live. But do you think that you noticed, like, at NAMM, that that the educational aspect of it, that people are getting more and more hungry to buy educational products and things like that? And do you think that for a musician that it would be worth their time to say, you know, put up some instructional videos on YouTube, or try to get in on that sort of the educational aspect of it to make some extra money?
Yeah, I think that's a great opportunity, especially on YouTube. Like, if you know how to play a song, if you're into a certain niche. For me, for example, so I'm in Nashville. I would call it Guitar Town. The NAMM Guitar Show is here, right? We're Music City, USA. Yet there's still some styles of music that I'm not able to find a great teacher for. And one of the things that I get really excited about is being able to go on YouTube and to go look at really kind of obscure songs and find how people are playing them and then learn them. Or also, something else that I really like is a company called TrueFire.com, and you saw a lot of those companies at NAMM. And TrueFire.com, if you're a guitar player or a bass player, it's amazing. You can go there, and they've got these incredible teaching tools. They break things down. They've got multi-cameras on the guitar teacher's hands, picking hand and their fretting hand, and they've got, it's like, you can slow them down, you can speed them up, you can play with backing tracks, and it's literally any kind of music that you would want to play. And if I can't find it here in Nashville, I know other people can't find it, because, like I said, this is a guitar town. So I think that's probably the most exciting thing about where we are with music education, and there's certainly an opportunity for any musician who's into even pop music, even something like, we talked about Get Lucky by Daft Punk and that whole thing about how they were promoting that. Do you know how many covers of Get Lucky and bass covers and guitar covers and bossa nova covers of that song there are on YouTube? So even if it's a popular album and a popular genre of music, you can have fun with it, and you can get people over to look at what else you're doing. And it's just a cool way to connect with other guitar players and I say guitar players because I'm a guitarist myself, but other musicians in general.
Cool. All right, so should we get to this week's question and this week's topic?
Yeah, let's get to the meat. This is about music publishing, which is very exciting to me because my company actually started as a music publishing company. So I'll let you answer, or ask, rather, the question that we got.
Yes. Okay, so Manny Hernandez sent us an email and that said, "Hello, wanted to take a few minutes to thank you guys for the great job that you were doing." So thank you, Manny. Really appreciate that. I wanted to know if there was a possibility for a podcast request. I'm interested in starting an independent music publishing company, and I was wondering if you guys could cover the topic in a future podcast. Thanks again, and keep up the awesome work. And so, of course, we're always open to, and I love that email because we're open to discussing whatever it is that you guys want to know about. So I know virtually nothing about music publishing, so I'm going to let you kind of take over, and I'll interject with some questions here and there just to make sure that you're being clear. So talk to us about music publishing. First of all, I'm guessing that 99% of people who are listening to this know about music publishing or know what a music publishing company is. But could you just, like, in a sentence or two, kind of sum up what music publishing is, just for those maybe who don't know about it?
Yeah, music publishing, the way I would summarize it or describe it, is simply owning the copyright on a song. And when you think of a song, Wendy, it's usually there are two different things you think about. There's a sound recording, which is a moment in time that's on tape. I'm going to continue with the Daft Punk theme. They're our official band of the musicmarketing.com podcast. If you listen to Daft Punk play that song Get Lucky, you're listening to their recording. But there's also an underlying composition. There's somebody who composed the song, they wrote it out, and it's kind of what you would think of with like sheet music, if you will. It's what you would use to play. It's the intellectual property behind the recording. So that's really what music publishing is. It's not owning the masters, although you could own the masters. It's owning the underlying composition.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Is that in a layman terms? Okay.
Yep.
And with that said, I want to add too that while my company started as a music publishing company, I don't really consider myself a music publisher. I'm a marketer first and foremost, and I'll explain kind of how I got into that business. And really, almost everybody in the music industry that I know has a music publishing company, from producers to people on the record label side. And that's just kind of how Nashville was built, which is how I got into it. So there are a lot of different ways to do it. This is how I do it, and I think it's a great opportunity for independent bands and songwriters and anybody in the industry to make a little money on the side. So what is the first question? Do you want to talk about how I got started into music publishing?
Yeah, how did you get started, and why did you choose music publishing first before starting a record label or doing anything else?
Well, when I was growing up, I grew up in Nashville, and you would drive down Music Row, and all of the buildings on Music Row they were record labels, they were music publishing companies, or they were studios, for the most part. So I knew about record labels and how they made money. I knew about studios and how they made money. But when I finally went to college, I didn't have a whole lot of business experience at that point, but I went to college for commercial music. And I remember one of my professors told me, he said, if you want to make money in the music business, music publishing is the way to go. And I thought about all those buildings that I passed on Music Row as a kid, because I kind of grew up in that area, and thought, okay, so music publishing is how I make money. And I remember, even before I graduated college, I started my own music publishing company. And that's really a pretty simple process. You can do that through your performing rights organization. You can do it through, if you're a member of the BMI and already writing and they're collecting your performance royalties, you can work with them. But music publishing companies, because you can only write for under one performance rights organization, and because your co-writer, let's say, might be with ASCAP and you're with BMI, music publishing companies, for the most part, have an arm for ASCAP, they have an arm for BMI, and in some cases have one for CSAC as well, which is the third but also pretty hefty performing rights organization here in the United States. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep.
So anyway, that's how I got started. I thought it was a way to make money, and strangely enough, how we got into the radio promotion, and not really the street marketing and things, but how I got into radio promotion was I had a music publishing company. I would own intellectual property from people. I would sign publishing deals with upcoming bands and really the writers, and then we would get into exploiting, trying to make these songs hits, and I owned the publishing on them. So
I'm kind of curious. I don't know exactly how long ago you started your publishing company.
20 years ago.
20 years ago. So what's the difference now, or what are the similarities between starting one then as opposed to starting one now? Well,
there's not really any difference as far as I know. Granted, it's been a while since I've started. It used to be that you would have to have something that was distributed before they were willing to grant you a publishing company, and these days that's really, really easy because it just has to be done through iTunes. So
okay.
As far as I know, there are no real differences. It would be something that you could call up BMI, you could call up ASCAP, you could call up CSAC, any of the performing rights organizations. And if you're overseas, like Wendy, you would call up SOCAN in Canada and to say, hey, listen, send me the forms. I want to start a music publishing company. And what you'll do is, usually this is how it works. And again, it's been a while, but you would pick 3 names that you want to use for your music publishing company. Like sometimes you'll see, for example, Roy Orbison is called Still Working Music. So when you see that those company names, say Still Working Music, ASCAP, that's a publishing company. Still Working Music, BMI, that's a publishing company. You see them on the back of film credits. You see them on liner notes. And basically, they'll grant you one of those three names, assuming that nobody else has taken it. And that's the reason you give them three, just because if I were to call it like Windy Music, that's probably already taken. And they don't want to have a name that's similar to another publishing company, because then that's how things get confusing and the wrong royalties get into the wrong place.
So before you talk about, like, you know, the how of starting a music publishing company, well, I guess you just did, but how to, like, actually get one actually started. But in terms of actually getting it functioning and bringing in money, can you talk about the why? Like, you know, as a musician, I would imagine you already have, like, a lot of the stuff that you're juggling. What would be the advantage of taking on yet another project and starting a publishing company? What would be the advantage of that?
Well, here's the thing. You are already juggling a lot of things, but if you are writing and performing and releasing your own stuff, unless you've already signed with another publishing company, you're actually already doing music publishing. So here's the reason that you would want to get into music publishing officially, is because you can sign other writers and you can have a bigger catalog and you can leverage their work and get a little piece of their pie.
Okay.
So here are the basics, Wendy. Basically, a music publishing company, you own the copyright on songs. As I mentioned earlier, you own the copyright for the underlying composition. And let's say that Rick Springfield wants to cut one of your songs. Okay, well, he would go do that. He would own the recording of it. And every time it got played, you would make the money on it. You would, and the publishing company splits it with the writer. So you would do a deal where it's a 50-50 split. Half the money from that performance goes to the publishing company, half the money goes to the writer. Does that make sense?
It does, but again, I'm going to ask you to elaborate on the why. Because, okay, so cool, you have your own stuff, and you have your own publishing company, but then when you start talking about actually going out and getting, like, the rights to other people's music, again, that sounds like a lot of work. And while it can be advantageous in that then it opens up new money opportunities when it comes to licensing it for, you know, TV or film or things like that.
Right.
But why, like, again, what's the advantage of putting in the work of actually seeking out other musicians and convincing them to, you know, to give you the rights or sell the rights to their music? Here
it is. Anytime the song is used, you get paid. That means if it gets played on the radio, you get paid. If it gets licensed to film and television, you get paid. If it's sheet music, you get paid. If it's a Broadway play, you get paid. If it's in a church musical, you get paid. So anytime there's a performance of it, anytime there is what we call a mechanical, if you were to press 1,000 CDs and the rate is like 9 cents and some change per song per CD, so you'd make $90 on that, and it'd be split between the writer and the publisher.
Okay, so let's just say that you are the publisher, you're starting up your publishing company, and I'm a musician whose music that you would like to have in your catalog. So as the publisher, what, like, process do you go through in order to win me over, so that, because I could just as easily, you know, obviously create my own publishing company.
You could,
so,
and here is what you need to bring to the table, because, you know, some people just want, like, the administration, they just don't want to deal with it. They say, well, you know, I'm going to sign it over to you and you handle all the paperwork for me, make sure that everything's copyrighted, make sure whatever. That's really like the very beginning musicians. That's not necessarily like a smart deal. The reason you would come to me, Wendy, like me personally, is because I know film and TV licensing people. If I've got a connection to the label, if I can go out and exploit your song, what I would do is I'm basically taking a percentage of what you've got, assuming that I can go and get it cut. Because, you know, 100% of nothing is nothing. And 50%, if I take 50% of it, if I can't do anything with it, that's nothing either. So what we're betting is that you'll let me have a piece of the pie, but I can go out and get Rick Springfield to cut that song. Or I can get your song as the theme for Keeping Up with the Kardashians.
Right.
Or I can get your song used in a way that's going to collect us money. That's the reason. That's the reason people would sign with a publishing company. Or here's another one. Sometimes, and this is kind of a crapshoot, but they put songwriters on retainer, for example. So let's say I'm just a rich guy, I want to be involved in the music business. I could go out. Nashville's full of songwriters. I could go out and probably find somebody who's a writer, give them $1,500, maybe $2,000 a month, and say, listen, here's a draw for you, and this is enough money for you to live on and for you to write songs full time, and that is now your job. And anything that you write, you're going to let me have a piece of it. So some people would do that, and the advantage to them, and that's the reason they would sign for you, is because you're taking the risk by paying them money up front, hoping to make it on the back end.
Yeah, I think, we talked about this before we did the podcast. You were explaining this to me, and I told you that I have a project that I am working on that deals with guided meditations. So I am always looking for music that I can use for those guided meditations. And it would be kind of cool because I know that there's obviously there's a need, because there's tons of like royalty-free music sites, right? So people have a need for that background kind of new agey kind of music. And so are you saying then, like, for example, with me, if I wanted to start my own music publishing company, I could seek out musicians who compose that kind of music, buy the rights to it, and then set up my own site as an example, or go find people who are looking for that kind of music and then split the cost with the musician. Would that be like a good practical example?
Yeah, basically. But think of it like this, though. We're still talking about the underlying composition, basically words and music. Have you ever seen the charts where there are words with the chords above them?
Yeah.
And the melody. That's basically what you own. You would still have to go out and have somebody record it. You're not necessarily getting the master from them.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And that's another reason that somebody would sign for you. Let's say you have a studio in your house, and you're really good at cutting demos, and you know how to play stuff, and you can sing well, and you've got a writer who maybe isn't a great singer, maybe you're a great producer, and you're a great recording engineer. Well, they might sign with you just because you can do the demos, and you can, in turn, like I said earlier, go out and exploit them. That's another advantage to them. As a publisher, you're usually handling the demos, you're handling the exploitation of the music. And a lot of writers, let's face it, they're introverted. They like their creative process, but they're not necessarily the kind of guys that are going to go out and press the flesh and take all these meetings. They want to be in that creative element. It's the two different brains of all of us, really, the left brain and the right brain. So one person handles the business, the other person handles the creative. It's not unlike if you think about Elvis and Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker. Colonel Tom did the business, Elvis did the creative.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because it seems like a lot of musicians are trying to figure out how to, for example, get their own music licensed, and are having a hard time figuring out how to connect with the right people to make that happen. And then then you're saying, on top of that, try to figure out how to make it happen for other people. So I guess it would, starting a music publishing company would be more for the kind of people who are really into the business aspect of it, or for those people who are, those musicians who are transitioning, who, maybe are wanting to get away from the creative and try to find their own niche within the music part of it. So
sure, and for the person starting, and we're calling what I call a publishing company is maybe not what other people would call a publishing company. You own the music publishing, which is why I call it a publishing company. But really what I'm talking about is starting, it's kind of a hybrid between somebody who's going to go out and do film and TV, go out and get stuff cut, go out and get stuff used in advertising. But they make their money on the back end, cut the demos, basically exploit the song in any way possible, because that's really where the money is being made in the music business now. It's owning the copyright.
Okay. So, but do you think, though, that at the end of the day that it's a good opportunity?
It's absolutely it's an amazing opportunity, because imagine owning half of a song, and you've got $100,000 in performance royalties, or $10,000, or even $5,000. If every time that song gets played, it makes $1, you get 50 cents. That's unbelievable. So it's an incredible opportunity for people who are savvy with business and who have the ability to go out and actually get the song exploited. You don't want to have necessarily a huge catalog that doesn't get used. That's just wasting your time. But if you can have some songs that are, we were talking before the show about Spotify and how there's music that you have access to in Canada that I don't, and vice versa. There's stuff that's available in the U.S. and there's stuff available not in the United States. So if you have, well, I don't know where I'm going with that, Wendy, but the bottom line is, I lost my train of thought. But anytime music gets used, sometimes if you look up a song on Spotify, this is where I was going, is you'll see a cover song, for example, maybe a Garth Brooks. Garth Brooks doesn't want Spotify to use his music, but a lot of people have gone in and done covers to fill that need. Well, whoever owns the publishing on the Garth Brooks song is making money on that just the same as if it were Garth Brooks.
Okay, so give some advice to Manning. How do you start a publishing company?
Well, here's what I would do. If I were starting today, first of all, you need to get set up with BMI or ASCAP, and I talked about how to do that. Just call them up, say, hey, I want to start a publishing company, give me the process, and they'll give you the process. It's fairly easy. When I set it up, you had to do a lot of stuff in paper. They may even have it online. It may even be that easy, but it more or less is you need to write them a check for a little bit of money just to have it registered in their books, and then they get it going. Then what I would do is I would look for writers that are interested in letting you go out and exploit their material. And I use exploitation, again, in a very, very good way. Can you get it in an advertisement? Can you get it cut by other artists? Can you get it used, basically?
How do you find those writers and musicians? Well,
I think musicians know musicians. And we all know, if I were to start with this, I would find a guy who's just got some amazing songs, open mic nights or writers rounds, or you just know a guy who's got great songs, but he's not recording them. He's not going out there trying to get them cut. And if you can add some kind of value to him, and just that would be the pitch. Say, listen, man, you got great stuff, but it's a tree falling in the forest and nobody's around to hear it. So I'm going to go and basically promote you. And the way I'm going to make my money is I'm going to own a little bit of the copyright, and I don't get paid until you get paid.
So, okay, how do you do the promotion then? There's like two scenarios. Either you already have contacts but no content, or you have content and no contacts. So
or you have neither.
Promote? Or you have
neither, right? What you would need to do is obviously, if you're in film and television, it's going to help to be in a market like that in Los Angeles. You go to a yoga class, you're going to see a film and TV music supervisor. Right? So, yeah. I mean, if I'm here in Nashville, I'm going to run into somebody that's looking for something. Hey, I got this artist, and we're looking for a up tempo, and it needs to be about partying. And do you have any songs like that? And then you would do that pitch, or you would just have a really great song and say, hey, listen, I think this would be great for this artist that you're working with. I mean, you got to go out and work. This isn't just like, you collecting a check. This is actually going out and making the connections. This is going out and refining the pitch. And this is having something that people are going to be interested in.
So can you elaborate on that? Because what you just described are kind of like random synchronistic meetings. You just happen to cross paths with someone. And you can't obviously base a business completely based on random encounters. So how do you put yourself out there to let either people who are looking for music, let them know that you exist, or how do you connect with them specifically and make that happen?
Well, that's probably something for another podcast, and we can definitely dive deep into that. But just in my day-to-day life, and I think this could be in the day-to-day life of you or anybody else, I run into producers that are working with artists. Hey, you need any songs? Look, we got some songs. I would be perfect for that. I mean, it's you kind of being there to anticipate the needs of people through the songs that you have. So I run into people all the time. They're working with a new artist. Hey, I got a song I think would be perfect for you.
Okay, but here's the thing though. Not everyone lives in Nashville, and not everyone lives in LA.
Yeah.
So what if you wanted to start a music publishing company, and is it possible to make those connections and make your presence known completely online?
Yes, certainly. Sometimes you'll see people that are looking for something very, very specific. I think somebody that does that a lot, that a lot of people listening to this would be familiar with, would be like Taxi. They'll send out what they call a tip sheet. Say, we're looking for this type of song, and you can obviously submit things that way. If you wanted to just, your publishing company, just you get everything that you do, all your cuts, all your uses through Taxi. That may or may not be the best way to do it, but that's a way to do it. I think the best way to do it is for you to be known as somebody who just has really great songs. You've got a great ear for songs, and you stick to a very specific genre, and you're that guy. Like, if I needed power ballads, Wendy, I'm going to come to you. And if I need something that's laid back and you specialize in new age music, I'm going to come to you. And you start building that reputation. Again, I hope that, earlier that we didn't, or I didn't, make this sound too easy. You got to get your feet on the ground. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be in Nashville, New York, Los Angeles, or wherever you feel that there are really a lot of opportunities. But it does mean that you're going to have to keep your ears and eyes open for what people are looking for and make connections. And like I said, anticipate what it is they need before they even know. Hey, we're working with a new artist. Well, hey, are you looking for anything? Well, we are. Well, look, I got something I think would work great for a new type of artist like that.
So not to go on and on about it, but from your experience, those people who are looking for that kind of music, they're not like advertising, and like I don't mean literally advertising, but I mean as in putting it out there online so much, right? I mean, this is like a personal kind of thing where they have their like acquaintances and they know who to call already, right?
Absolutely, it is. But here's the thing, though. This would be really good for somebody who's like a producer. This would be really good for somebody who's got a recording studio and they're working with upcoming artists. I mean, how many people want to get into the music industry? Right now, I could walk out my door and probably 10 minutes find 5 young women, teenage girls, that want to be the next Taylor Swift, and they need material because their material, it's not up to where it should be, or they just have a dream. They're just a vocalist. They're not writers. There are a lot of artists that are not writers. A lot of singers, and that's really where it is. And that doesn't have to be Nashville. That could be Chunky, Mississippi. There are a lot of bands that need great material. It really starts with a great song. The production is great, but it's funny. I heard a demo today, and I don't want to say who it was because it would be embarrassing. It was so polished, and this woman was a background singer for a well-known artist that you would know, but the material wasn't there. So unless you've got that song, and that's where the publishing company comes in with a perfect song, you're not going to get anywhere. It doesn't matter how good a singer you are. We want lyrics that connect. We want a melody we can hum along with, and we want something that we're really going to connect with.
So not only do you need to be open to making connections, right, and accept the fact that a lot of your business, the time and energy that you're going to be putting into this business is going to be about making connections, you have to have a good ear for good quality music.
Absolutely. But with that said, though, sometimes what I like isn't necessarily going to be what you like. So I think it needs to transcend personal taste. Sort of like if I was an interior decorator and I really love the colors yellow and orange, but I come over to your house and you're more of a black and white person, I'm going to start showing you black and white things because that's what you want. You're the final client. And a music publisher is going to be like that. So I think it's about anticipating needs and being able to get out of your own style. And just because you like it doesn't mean it's great. And just because you're not a fan of it doesn't mean that it's not amazing. But you have to know the difference of that.
So can you talk about like kind of almost the day-to-day operations of running a publishing company and what the main things, I guess we kind of covered it, but can you just elaborate on the main tasks that someone who wants to have a publishing company needs to do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I think the main task is getting a copy of the music on tape getting like a demo, something that showcases the song itself, showcases the underlying composition, and going out and either getting it cut by another artist, which would be another recording, or you having the very specific recording. This would be if you signed on with a band, like one person who has a band, but he's also the writer. You made the deal with the writer, but with that writer comes his own recordings and his band. And in that case, you could go and you can license the master, but you also get a chunk of that publishing because the underlying composition is what you've got.
Yeah, see, I guess I would ask you to back up a second because we don't know, like, Manny's situation. He could be a producer.
We don't, and I think it's just an opportunity for some people. It's not going to be for everybody, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. That's one of the reasons that people would be willing to sign over their copyright to you. If it were that easy, they could all do it themselves.
Well, what I was going to say before you interrupted me was that we don't know his situation and where it is that he's beginning. But I was going to say is, can you start like at the beginning in that obviously you have to have content. So assuming, like, let's just say if I wanted to start a publishing company and I wasn't a producer and I didn't have access, just immediate access to talent, people coming and going through my recording studio or whatever, would the first task be to go online and to go?
Yeah, let me tell you how I did it, because I was in that exact situation. I was not a producer. I was a musician, but I didn't have a recording studio, and I wasn't going to be able to record people. So what I did is I knew I had a street promotion background. I knew I wanted to get in music publishing. I had a little bit of a radio background as a radio DJ. Not really, just like college stuff, a little post-college stuff, right? Not any big deal. But I kind of knew how music was promoted, and I knew that I could earn a piece of that music if I owned the publishing. So I tied mine in with promotion. Said, listen, I'll go out and do this promotion for you, and I'll either do it at cost or I'll do it for free. Just give me enough money just so I can cover the mailings and things, for example. That's what I mean by at cost. And if something happens to this, I'll get a piece of the song, I'll get a piece of the deal, but if nothing happens, you're only out, the price of a Federal Express or something. So I tied it in with my promotion company, which is really what I do now. I'm a marketing guy. That was really where my talent was. So I think this is when we say publishing company again. I'm not. It's what I said earlier. It's what I call publishing company isn't how maybe a lot of the guys in Nashville would think of publishing. What I'm saying is, if you're out doing something, if you're an engineer, if you're a producer, if you're a guy like me, you're into marketing, or if you're a promoter, you can get a piece of this, and it can be a nice supplementary income.
Okay. So would you do the same thing today as you did then? Because as an example, I would think, again, in my naive mindset, if I wanted to do music publishing, I'd, let's say, go to Reverb Nation, and I would look at music or listen to a bunch of music. And let's say I came across an artist that I really liked, then I'd contact them. And I don't know how I exactly convinced them to partner with me because I have no credentials.
Okay, and with that said, let me say, like, where I was when I started this thing, it was a little bit different because that was the day when we were pressing CDs. People were still pressing cassettes. we were going to radio. You couldn't just put your music up online where people could hear it. It was a real value to them to have anybody even hear their music. So things have changed. That's why I talk about just the exploitation of it and actually getting the music used in a way where people are going to get paid.
Right. So then, again, the question is, what would you do with the resources that are existing today? Yeah,
I would do what we talked about earlier. I would start making those connections, look for people that are using music, and it could be something easy. It could be like, Pepe's Pizza down the street. It could be
what?
Yeah, you can. If you want to do some kind of like jingle deal or something like that, where there's going to be money split for. And that gets more into like marketing, not necessarily like publishing, but you can exploit music in any kind of way.
Oh, I thought you meant like finding a musician at like the pizza place. I'm like, what?
No. I'm talking about like making it the theme song for the pizza place.
Right.
So if you had a song called like Hot and Tasty or Hot and Fresh, or it could be a perfect pizza jingle, and you never know when that stuff's going to get picked up. So.
Okay, so I guess my question is, where do you get the music? Again, assuming that you don't have immediate access to music, where do you find songs?
Well, start asking. Go to the open mics. Go to the songwriting rounds. If you know a musician, you know other musicians. Musicians all know each other. Go on the internet. But you have to have something to offer. You can't just say, hey, everybody, here's a contract. Why don't you sign over your copyright to me? Then we're all square. You've got to give them something in return for that.
Okay.
I mean, finding the musicians isn't hard. You can go, what did you, Reverb Nation, you said? Probably 100,000 musicians on there. CD Baby, 100,000 musicians. MySpace still has musicians on there. Okay. So finding the musicians isn't tough. Finding the guys that are going to work with you, finding the guys that have the good songs, and then you having your connections, that's where it's tough.
Speaking of connections, do you have a bit of advice on, and we talked about this earlier again, being in the right city, that kind of thing, but can you make connections at like, I don't know, music conferences? Can you make connections with people on Twitter?
Yeah.
How do you make connections?
I just walk up to people.
I know.
I was at NAMM. Yo, do you mean like at a conference or just in general?
Well, I mean, because I think that you're in a fortunate position. But for everybody who isn't living in Nashville or LA, and you want to use your online resources because they're most immediately available, and also you're willing to do some traveling.
Well, let me talk about that though, because you say I'm in a fortunate position, but I wasn't always in a fortunate position. I started my company in Memphis when I was in college. I lived in Mississippi a little while after that, and then after that, I was in Columbus, Ohio, pretty big city, right? Maybe about the size of Nashville. But it wasn't a music center by any means. And you hop in a car, you get on a plane, you go to these conferences, you make the trip, hang out, there a week, set up the meetings, join the Nashville Songwriters Association, join Songwriters Guild. I mean, you just start doing it just like you would in any industry.
Okay.
So that's that's how to do it. And as I was talking about with NAMM, I mean, I'm in Nashville, but there were a lot of people coming from all over. From Wisconsin, I met people from Wisconsin. I met a guy from West Virginia. I met a guy from Virginia. And you just walk up to him, hey man, what's going on? Start talking to him. And again, that's a different show. Probably we should have one about networking and some networking techniques. I got a guy that I can bring on that talks about those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
we should do
that. People aren't just going to come to you. NAMM had thousands and thousands of people there. It's really up for you to make that connection. And I would say jump in.
Okay.
When I started, imagine this. I started this company. I was a college kid, man. I was a college kid, and I had a website that was on the student. It didn't even have like cathoderaymusic.com or musicmarketing.com. It was like memphis.edu/david/music.html. It was obvious I was a student. And for the first probably 5 years, I'm 40 now, but when I was, in my 20s, I would go to these places. I would finally meet people after talking to them by phone or via email and say, man, you're young. They were so blown away that I was so young that I was doing all this because nobody else was doing it. So I know that it can be done, and it's still possible today. It's probably even more possible because more musicians are online, more of the industry is open to doing this. There are also a lot of talented people that were in the old major label system or the major publishing company system that have just kind of been neglected by it, if you will. And they're just waiting for somebody to come in and be able to exploit their music properly. And you could do this just all online. You could be like, hey, go to... Here's a great one, Wendy. I know... You know how many videos are on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And when music is used on YouTube, that money goes to the publisher. So if you could just get stuff just only used on YouTube and stupid home videos with like a cat skateboarding or something, that's going to make you money. That's exploitation. So I mean, who wouldn't do that? If you told me, if you were, you know, connected in that way, hey, listen, I'm going to go and I'm going to get you 50 million views of a video with your music in it. Now, obviously, there's nothing guaranteed, but I'd take 50% of that over 100% of nothing.
Right. Right.
So there are possibilities all around. This is not just like, hey, get Taylor Swift to cut the song. The money really is made in publishing. It was known as kind of a nickel and dime business. The money is made on the small things. The money is made on a little bit of YouTube. The money is made on the advertising. The Taylor Swifts, all that stuff is great if you can get it, but it's more like a bunch of little faucets, not a huge Niagara Falls.
Okay. Any other advice you have for Manny or anybody else out there who's thinking about doing this?
Well, I think it's a huge opportunity right now because I think that music copyright through licensing and through performance, that's where the money is being made right now. Not so much through what we call mechanicals because there are not as many record sales as there were, but there still are opportunities there as well. So if you're going to do something in the music business, and this is really just across the board, general advice, own it. Own the masters, which is the sound recording. Own the underlying composition, which is the publishing. If you can get a piece of somebody else's sound recording, if you can get a piece of somebody else's publishing, absolutely do it because that's the highest form of leverage. I mean, there's publishing catalogs here in Nashville. It's not uncommon to have $20, $30 million catalogs sell.
Wow.
I mean, that has some hits, right? It has some hits.
Right.
It's not just some guy who's going on YouTube and getting it in the cat skateboard video. But I mean, that's the kind of money that's available here.
Well, Manny, I hope that gave you the advice that you're looking for. And if it didn't, just send us another email and I'll make sure David gets it and he can maybe reply back. And I hope that everybody else got something out of listening to your advice as well.
Thank you, Wendy. All right, we'll be back soon for another episode of the musicmarketing.com podcast, episode 11, coming soon.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the musicmarketing.com podcast. If you have any questions or comments, email David and Wendy at musicmarketingpodcast@gmail.com. To listen to past shows and get even more music marketing advice, visit musicmarketing.com.